Hello my friends, this is Eugene and it's my EU4 countries history guide. As I promised, today we will speak about the history of Denmark. Before we start, I would like to say that the history of Denmark, as the history of most of the Scandinavian countries, it's about the conquest of new territories, of losing them, and of constant civil wars and internal conflicts. A bit later, you will understand why is it so. Well, as usual, I start my historical guides from the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Today it will be the same, or maybe we'll start a bit earlier, something like the 1st century. During this, the tribes, Anglo-Saxon tribes, who were living on the lands of today's Denmark, or Jutland as it was also known, they started their migration, most likely to the on the lands of today's England. They were moving there, and on the new lands, the Gothic tribes came. One of these tribes was the Dan tribe. During till the 7th or even 8th century, they were taking this land, assimilating with the native tribes, and establishing their own, not kingdoms, but something like counts or duchies. The first rise of the Denmark of Danes was related to the beginning of the Vikings age. So it's the period when the people of Scandinavia were leaving their homes in order to find some wealth, some treasures, some lands somewhere else. First, these journeys were just about robbing, so they're going into the north of the Frankish kingdom, into the England especially, robbing churches, coastal villages, and then some little cities, and they're coming back into their homelands. But in 865, the great army of Vikings came into the north of England. It was, according to some notes, the sons of a legendary Danish Jarl Ragnar Lodbrok. So his sons were leading a giant army, giant for those times army of Vikings, and they managed to conquer the kingdom of Northumbria. If on the map of EU4 it is something like this. In 867 they captured the York, and the Yorkshire, the territory, York or Yorwick, the main city in the north of England, and for some time it became the capital, the Vikings' capital on the British Isles. Soon after this, they were able to conquer the entire east coast of England, so something like this, and establish, after the truce with the main rival who were in the British Isles, the King of Wessex, because Northumbria was conquered. Mercia, the kingdom between them, was not so really powerful. That's why after the truce of the Kings of Wessex, the territory of Danelaw was established here. The territory where the Danish laws were working instead of English ones. And that's why we have the this achievement, the Iron Prince, there you need to conquer these four provinces, one, 2, 3, 4, and to convert culture there to Danish ones. Well, but these territories were under the rule of Denmark not for long ago. Already to the 924, most of them were lost, and to the 954, all the Viking territories were reconquered by the kings of Wessex and the allies. At the same time, in Denmark itself, in 936, the first Denmark king, Gorm the Old, has appeared. So, if in history it is the first known king of the United Denmark. His son, Harald the First, in let me see. Yeah, in 960, converted to the Christian faith. He became the first king in Scandinavia who did so, and Denmark became the first Christian kingdom in the Scandinavia. Nevertheless, soon the second wave of Vikings conquest began. The Viking conquest of England, of course. So it started in 980s, and in 1014 Vikings were able to capture the English crown. Maybe not the entire England, but at least the English crown. And the Danish ruler, Danish king Knut the Great, was able to rule 3 kingdoms at a time: a kingdom of Denmark, kingdom of Norway, and kingdom of England. It was lasted till 1015 till 1035. So it was even the first empire of the North Sea. But after the death of Knut, the English nobles were able to reconquer the kingdom of England and elect the king from the Anglo-Saxon noblemen. The Danish rulers were trying to once again conquer England, but the Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror, managed to do it first in 1066, and soon after this the rulers of Denmark were only once able to disembark in England, but they signed a truce with William, so they gained some gold and came back. After this, no of our attempts to conquer England, there was no such attempts already after this. And from this time, for the second half of the 11th century and for the first half of the 12th one, it was the age of maybe not the civil war, but the constant conflicts between the Danish kings and the Danish nobility. So they were trying, the first ones were trying to increase their power, the nobility was trying to decrease the power of the kings. It was till the ruler Valdemar the Great captured the Danish throne. During his ruling period, he was managed to, in the 1180s, conquer the Mecklenburg and part of the Pomerania, and the south of Sweden also. Soon after this, in 1202, the territories of Holstein were conquered, as well as some kind of crusade was made in the north of Estonia, of today's Estonia. These territories were conquered also. But unfortunately for the Denmark, in 1227, after the defeat in the war against the rebellion of Holstein and Mecklenburg, together and the allies of Hansa, the main rival of Denmark for the nearest several centuries, the united forces were able to beat the Danish army, and due to this, Denmark lost entirely all the territories in the north of Germany. And from this moment, the new wave of internal conflicts appears in Denmark. It was the conflicts with Sweden, with Hansa, and between the king and the nobility. Each one was trying to use the outside powers. Due to this, the Duchy of Holstein gained some lands and some real power in the inside, and were managed to have some power inside of Denmark due to because of kings of Denmark. They needed some support. They granted lands, money to the counts and the dukes of Holstein, as well as to our outside forces. It was so till the new king appeared in 1340. Valdemar the First was able to take the throne, the crown, and managed to restore the king's power in Denmark, to unite it once again. It was a real disaster happening in Denmark. Most of the main cities were burned, ruined, captured by somebody. So it was a total mess happening here. He was able to unite it, to rebuild it, and even in the 1360s we managed to take Gotland from the Hansa trade league, but it led to some bad consequences, because the new war had started with Hansa, and it led to, first, it was all going well. The Danish army was even able to capture the giant Hansa fleet, which was later ransomed for a huge sum of money. But as it usually happens in Scandinavia, the nobility of Denmark was not really pleased of the internal policy of the Valdemar because of his tax policy, his willingness to gain more power in Denmark, and they betrayed him. They became an allies of Hansa, and the Valdemar was defeated and had to leave his crown. Well, and soon after this, as for me, one of the main characters in the history of Denmark, due to the EU4 starting date of 1444, appears. This is I can't call her queen, but at least maybe even so. We will speak about Margaret I. So she was the daughter of the King Valdemar IV, as well as she was the wife of the Norwegian king Haakon VI. Due to this, their son Olaf in future should become the king of Denmark as well as the king of Norway. So it happened in 1380, after the death of Haakon. Olaf became the king of two kingdoms. But unfortunately and suddenly in 1387 he died, and Margaret became the ruler of these two kingdoms. She chose a new heir, Eric, her nephew, and became his regent. Soon after this, in 1388, the Swedish nobles asked for her support. For several years before, the civil war began in Sweden. It was a war between the nobilities, of those who were supporting the King Magnus. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that King Margaret's husband, Hakon, was the son of King Magnus of Sweden. Uh, and a bit later, King Magnus were fighting with the rest of the Swedish nobility who were not supporting him. These noblemen asked the Duke of Mecklenburg, Albert, to support them. In one of the battles, Albert were able to beat King Magnus and even capture him, and to some extent became the new king of Sweden. The rest of the nobility who were supporting King Magnus was not really pleased of this, and they asked Margaret to help them. She was really glad to do so, and already in 1389 the united forces of Denmark and its Swedish allies were able to defeat the Albert. He had to retreat into Mecklenburg, and because of this, in 1396, Margaret's heir, Eric, was chosen as the new king of Sweden. And already in 1397 he was coronated as the king of three kingdoms, of Denmark, of Norway, and of Sweden. It happened in the city of Kalmar. That's why this union called the Kalmar Union. Yeah, and so Margaret was an advisor to the Eric till the 1412, and Eric himself was able to rule these three kingdoms from 1412 till 1439. But again, his rulership ended not due to his death, but because of some other options. Let it be called so. So Eric began the new conflict with Hansa, and they embarked the whole Danish trade in the Baltic Sea, and as well as Danish, the Norway and the Swedish ones. It was not really good for the Swedish nobility and the Swedish burghers, and they rebelled against Eric. So he had to leave the crown and moved to Gotland. From this moment, it happened as I already said, in 1439, and from this date Gotland was under his control. And in 1439, the new king of Denmark was chosen. It was Eric's nephew, Christopher of Bavaria, of this duchy. That's why in EU4, where is it? Yeah, we start with the same dynasty with Bavaria and the Palatinate. So now I think you will have no questions why Denmark here and Bavaria here have the same dynasties. Well, Christopher was the ruler of Denmark not for long ago. In 1448 he died, unfortunately, and still Eric was alive, and he granted the the Isle of Gotland to the new Danish king, and himself he was granted some little count in the Pomerania. So, as the starting date EU4 is 1444, and Gotland was during this period under the control of Eric, that's why I think we start playing Denmark with a rebellion on Gotland. It's, I think, due to this event. Yeah, and also during the Margaret Raid, due to some difficult successions, Denmark were able to gain the control under the part of the Holstein. So the Holstein, it was not only these two territories, but as well some other lands in the north of Germany. So the Denmark were able to control these two ones. That's why we start with Holstein as a vassal of Denmark. Well, that's, I think, all I wanted to say you. It's yes, as always, it's some brief guide, not the global one. That's now. I hope you know why this union is called the Kalmar Union. Why Denmark starts with Holstein as a vassal, with a rebellion on Gotland, and why always as it is in the 1444 starting date. And yeah, why do we have such an Iron Prince achievement here? Well, that's all for now, I think. Thanks for your attention. We'll be really grateful for your likes, subscribes, comments, and so on. Thanks you very much again. We'll be really grateful to see you here again. That's all for now. Bye bye, my friends.